Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this morning's episode. The title has arrived when your humanity calls to you. And I will tell you both the title, main title, and the subtitle are sentences that could be heard from two different parallel universes. What that means is when your humanity calls to you, that means when you do something in this life that it requires to be reminded to you your human dimension, or when your humanity calls to you. You know, it could be in a moment of indecency, in a moment of chaos, and the person's doesn't have a chaotic disposition. Do you know? And so that's when humanity calls to you. Or it could be like in the future sci-fi setting, aliens are, let's say there's I don't know, aliens have made contact with Earth. There's aliens living on Earth and human beings living on that alien's planet. So imagine a group of aliens beating up a human being. Then your humanity calls to you, for example. You know, that means we care for the human design very simply because we are being it. You know, I find it interesting. You know, so many people they wear jerseys of different sport teams and nationalism. You can say it has its own jersey, but I'm wondering when will people wear the universal jersey? When will we realize that we're just life in an organism? You know. So, when your humanity calls to you, and the other way the sentence can be heard is that when your humanity calls to you, that means when the advancement of your species calls to you. You know, it is one thing your neighbor asking you for help, but your a future of your civilization, its advancement, asking for the help of the individual, calling towards the individual, that's something else. There are some treasures that are personal, you know, and you can say there's some treasures that are impersonal, you know. Treasures that are a relationship. To continue, sorry about that. Okay, good morning, Samantha. Good luck on your first day, you know. be extra cheerful, I would say. So, guys, back to the idea. When your humanity calls to you, well, first you gotta clear your throat. I would say that something is missing, and it is the honor of the collective ultimately. I mean, that's the, we can totally see that it's a sort of fragmented, temporary, conditional honor in accordance to the event, just like a soccer player scores a goal, people feel honored, you know. But to think of a much more broader system of how human beings can wake up and find a feeling of allegiance with the realm, now that becomes a strength that cannot be taken. That means, one, it cannot be taken away, and in another way, it's a strength that you can't take, it comes. Do you know? That means if you're a young kid and you want to move an object that's heavy, you can't move it on your own. And if the child keeps trying to move this object, let's say for the parents are like, oh my god, this kid doesn't stop trying to move this object, eventually it will be assisted. Anything that endures, um, that passes the tests of time, it tends to find its own allies, you know. Eyes open. The world walks up to them. Unknown eyes. That's the first thing. From this world, there is noticed the self. From this self comes the journey of the individual. So we can treat ourselves as collective beings that are doing certain things individually, or we can treat ourselves as individuals trying to figure out the collective. You know, we can say in the same way that Carl Jung actually said collective, the collective unconscious, you know, we could think of the personal conscious as the antimatter to the collective unconscious. You know, it's like we can see that how everything we all together don't know has a value, and how everything we all know, sorry, I might have said that wrong, and everything we don't know, we have in common. That means what I don't know and what you don't know, that's something that it's like we both, it's equal. You know, nobody knows it. Neither me, I know, neither you. But the things that we personally and consciously know, I'm wondering that there is a value to that. That there is the collective conscious, and that's what's left. That means Carl Jung spoke about the personal conscious. He spoke about the personal unconscious. He spoke about the collective unconscious. And now the collective consciousness awaits. And this collective consciousness, I think it's one of those things that, you know how, like in a gathering, in a party, like when one person dances, they pave the way, then other people start dancing, and then suddenly you see the dance floor is filled, you know? It's one of those things. You know, it's too big. In front of our eyes, it is too big to hold. I feel that if we had minds, if we didn't have minds, it totally explains powerlessness. When I think about power in my life, it's like you don't just need to fuel your car, fuel up your car. After you fuel up your car, then it's the navigation. It's how you drive it. So on some level, survival is solving the filling up the car part, but it is not filling up the driving part. You know, what that means is it is not enough to just be an object in a world so vast and so unknown. We could act content. The next 100 generations could act content, but in the next 1,000 years, we will get bored of how we have identified with meaningless stuff so easily, meaningless matter. That means really we should all, I was speaking to someone, they were talking about the flying spaghetti monster. How as if you just saw people, they would be brains in the void. I feel just human psychology has two positions. Either the explorer continues or the explorer has given up. And based on where these ideas are, you can say, happen, here's the thing: in the outer realms, if you give up, you die. But in the inner realms, if you excuse me, if they're in the inner realms, the person can't let go, they suffer. You know, that means the mind doesn't suffer when it changes, but the body does. When the body changes, it's in some sense a registering of, it's a reformatting of the whole existential constitution. Everything in this life can be taken away except the attention of the being that wasn't a form from the beginning. Anything that has form, in some sense, it has a transitory nature. Pretty much it's either the self dies first or the world dies first. If the self dies in the world, the person will realize their self. When I say when the self dies in the world, I mean the idea of yourself dies. Saint Augustine, sorry, not Saint Augustine, Saint Francis Assisi, uh, he had this quote where he said, "It was dying, it is in dying to self that we are born to eternal. We are born to eternal life." This dying to self means the it's as if like the first blueprint for the architecture of reality is It's like a notebook, you turn the page. That means to turn the page means to completely let go of all content of the mind. Naturally, we turn the page when we sleep, I can say. The mind doesn't have purpose in a strange way. When I say mind, I mean the consciousness, you can say. Its purpose is limited to where it's found. It's like you look at a blue sky, what's the purpose? You look at wind blowing the leaves of a tree, what is the purpose? You look at stones, you know, what is the purpose? You look at rocks in the void, you ask, what is the purpose? On some level, before even the question was asked, nature was just happening. So I would say if we are to study the secrets of the human mind as a species, we have to have a fearlessness that's too many S's in that word. Fearlessness. That's technically a correct singular word, I would say. It's like, what's the secret to the universe? Fearlessness. Guys, there's a talk. I feel like people who are listening are regulars. I'll tell you, there's a talk I've put at the for like in the for returning subscribers in the video. There's something I say at the end of that talk. I can't tell you how many times I have laughed. You know, it's like I'm just gonna share that because it's like at the end of the talk, I'm talking about like human suffering, and then I'm saying how there's a biological reasoning, and I'm like, imagine somebody's like, man, I'm suffering in this world. What do I do? You know, there's so much pain, you know, suffering, you know, and the person's like, don't worry about it. It's just you're nervous. Can you imagine? It's like, oh, you feel pain, you feel existential anguish. Don't worry, man. It's just your nervous system. Oh, man. But it is on some level. I mean, that's why it's funny because there's a truth to it. There's a truth that as I am speaking right now, I am the periodic table incarnate. You know, technically, it's like the periodic table talking right now. You know, who knew atoms? All that atoms wanted to do was to just give a podcast. Swami Krishnananda, this yogi, was asked, what is religion? He said it's God remembering himself. And when I think about that, I don't see it in a religious context. I think about an advanced civilization. And for me, it falls into the same poetry. Just like how we have mystics who've seen, you know, the beauty of the beloved, and you could say Sufi mysticism. I would say I have seen only one thing. In the inner realms, it is so unknown you can't have an opinion. In the outer, not that it's super unknown, it's just that it's rhythmic. It's based on the rhythm of it in the inner realms. But in the outer realms, it is so known, and it's pretty much just like archery. I would say when I like how I experience the day, it's honestly archery. That means unless the person takes the bow and aims, like there's nothing happening. You know, Sorry guys, I think this was on mute maybe. I hope it wasn't, but anyways. So one thing I'll tell you, Samantha, I mean, I don't want to say too much, go and experience the new job yourself, but I'll tell you a story about something about a job. Pretty much, I mean, it has to do with just human nature. There's this interview the interview for a big company, but it's strangely at a house, and it's at a house where there's so many things wrong, from the mailbox having a problem to the door not being a bit loose, and the I don't know, doorbell being, you know, messed up or whatever. And so this guy's going for this job interview at this location, and he goes and he's like, okay, this is supposed to be a big company, and he's dressed in a suit, but by his nature, because the guy is, I think the term is a MacGyver, I don't know, but because the guy is very handy and the guy is aware, the guy goes and hits first of all, he passes the mailbox, he's seeing, okay, what's wrong with it, it can get solved in an instant. He instantly fixes the mailbox, you know. Then he goes and hits the doorbell. The doorbell's about to fall off. He fixes the doorbell. Then he goes and he fixes something else. And he's like, oh my God, this place is a mess. And as he's going along, for no reason, it's his nature to walk in efficient moments. And what happens is that, long story short, there's a sign, the guy goes back, the whole thing was filmed, there's a group of people clapping for him, I don't know why, but you know, it's a story. And so the guy realizes he, in some sense, passed the test. He actually cared for the environment he was working in because he was living in, you know. That means there is something strange when work moves out of the context of work. There comes a personal commitment to it. You know, this is why I feel entrepreneurs succeed, and they don't succeed because they have something special. It's because they continue, and they have a reason to continue. You know, for me, it's like business is like a gladiator arena. You know. The weak die first, and but I would say the point of that story, guys, pretty much was the person wasn't just being an efficient employee. The person was being an efficient human being. You know, so the best thing you can do, I think, is try to see what your employer wants. Like, try to see what world they're looking at. What is the boss of your boss want, if there is one. You know. What does the boss of your boss want from the boss that is bossing you? But anyways, guys, to go back to the title, when your humanity calls to you, I mean, eventually human beings have to behave differently. You know, it's like we're gonna be at some point. Okay. It's like, how long are we gonna keep going like this? You know. Okay. So we're individuals. Inevitably, we're moving either towards a collective or just dispersion and fading. Pretty much the drops either form a stream, a sort of river, or the drops evaporate alone. That's the strategy. Now, the idea is after we go into the river state, what would that look like? What would a rhythmic civilization look like? If the person's home, I mean, honestly, if we were immortal, think about it. If, let's say, 8 billion human beings were immortal, they couldn't die, and so we had lived all the kinds of possible lives, and we had gotten bored with violence. We're like, okay, we can be violent as much as we want, but it just delays manifestation. Do you know? I mean, technically, as an immortal, you don't die, right? So you can experience all sorts of ways of behavior. Eventually, you're like, what's the point of being here? And that's when it gets interesting. Sometimes I feel the nature of the universe is like an organism, like a biological body, even. That means it's like the body. How would I say? Let's say the heart is, I don't know, just experiencing what the heart is doing, and the stomach, the organ, is experiencing what it's doing, and they have, in some sense, no consciousness of each other, yet they are in the same system. That means if there is a chance that the essence of our sight is inseparable from universal intelligence, that means the only reason we exist as individuals is because the universe exists as an individual. If the world changes, the self can't remain the same. If the self changes, the world can't remain the same. So the calling of humanity would be how the world changes. But now we can't change the world as easily, so the selves have to change. Imagine there was a technology in the future that could make some of your cells like become super broken up to a point that they, in some sense, becomes invisible. What does that mean? That means there's a technology. Imagine the future. Imagine like your hand is you're walking, and I don't know. Let's say something messed up. Let's say you're on a helicopter. I don't know. Let's say you're walking somewhere, and uh, let's say your hand gets caught between the middle of subway doors, and the doors are about to close, and the thing's gonna move, and your hand is outside. With this technology, the person would instantly be able to make their hand invisible. In some sense, to a point, not invisible, but in a sense like untouchable. I mean, this honestly brings like a point of two types of invisibility. You know, an invisibility that is not form based, and an invisibility that is form based. The invisibility that's form based, you just pour paint on the invisible man, and you can see. That means I don't know why. I mean, honestly, guys, there's a lot of things that I cannot picture. If human behavior is code, I mean, the code can change. And let's say human behavior, this code, people, let's say there are programs, and there are programs that are programmed by their environment. And if they don't realize that the programming of the environment, they will never be able to become their own program, let's say, you know. And so the environment programs language, and how does language limit the being? It's as if, like, if we treat ourselves as energy, that means it's like, how can we conceive of the boundaryless? So the word energy, I would say, is as mysterious as the word soul. I'm sitting here trying to think about what vision of a collective humanity I can share for human beings to realize that they're part of the same species. Once being part of the same species, that vision has to lead to something. And so I'm thinking, let's say individuals were perfect. And let's say the collective was perfect. We had everything fixed. That means, let's just envision a world that we had to do nothing about. It was perfect from the beginning. There would be no reason to move. That means, I feel, if a human being attains perfection, they cease to exist. Here, at least, in this room. You know, it's funny, when I was when I was young, uh, there was this idea of first the body, mind, and soul. You know, then I can say I came to a point where I noticed, okay, the soul idea of the soul was kind of dismissed. Then I was left with the mind and body. You know, then I thought about the mind and body, and I realized there's no point. As if so many people are saying, don't ask why questions, don't read Friedrich Nietzsche, you know, don't wonder about the depths of the realm. And so then the mind was dismissed, and you are left as a body. And let me tell you, that is manipulation. You know, that is true manipulation. You know, I'll give you an example. Somebody's a great violinist, you know, but you convince them to play the drums. You know, they're in society, their world are telling them, yo man, you gotta play the drums, you were born in a drum family, you gotta play the drums till the end of your life or whatever. And this person is like, okay, I don't know what to do, the environment's intimidating, holy shit, I'm a kid, you know, and from a young age, the person starts playing the drums. Now the thing is, how long will pass until this person playing the drums will wonder, is this the right instrument? And we are being denied that question, to even ask it. That means in today's society, I would say people, you know, back in the day, the mob wanted food, the mob mentality. Now people want emotions, you know? But I feel there's an incredible potential for the intellect, you know? That it is true, mysticism leads you away from the material realm. What can one do when the void does not avoid them? You know, everything in life changes, and it's strange. You know, some philosophers have thought, is it a cruel joke? Why is it that 4.5 billion years, no problem, no consciousness? You know, it's like, no consciousness, no problem. So there was no consciousness, no problem. Suddenly there emerged consciousness, and we're like, why, Earth? Why? Why did you emerge as conscious to be aware of your pain? To be aware of how temporary you are? And then we realize it is in that temporary opportunity where beauty lives. I would say truth has taken too much of the spotlight, you know. That beauty is a truth of its own, and not the outer realms, not a beauty of form, a beauty of moment, noticing the primordial movement in the stillness of the cosmos. I will tell you, there's different levels of voidhood. So a person in their inner realms, they can be dismissed. A person at their end of their physical life, like renta karma, your body is going to be dismissed. You know, when the body is dismissed, a lot of opportunities are also dismissed. But when the mind is dismissed, before the body is dismissed, then it's as if they're, you know how in the Bhagavad Gita they said the soul is like the person sitting in the chariot hidden, the mind is like the chariot driver, and the body is like the horses. And the chariot driver, the mind is controlling the horses. You know, so I would say if the mind is dismissed, it would literally be like the chariot driver is no longer needed. And so the soul has found the strength to ride the horse of time and space alone. So I feel it becomes something like that. That means there are many levels of loneliness. What does that mean? That means, like, I don't know, like if there is a loneliness of feeling like a self in a giant world. You know, it's like the loneliness of being on a shoulder of a giant that doesn't respond to you. And then there is another kind of loneliness where I would say it's the loneliness with your. Think of it this way: your body can be alone, your mind can be alone, and if the soul is alone, you can never be alone. When I ask where the center of the universe is, in the outer realms, we are not the center of the universe. We can't even know. And in the inner realms, we are. Attention is the center of the subjective realm. This is why it's evocational. This is why if people are listening to me through their unknown view, you will be able to see every image as it comes. I feel there is such a thing as knowledge, but to know something, that is a show. That means when will man wonder about nature's mind? Imagine the archaic revival of the greatest questions that the world had to ask itself thousands of years ago. You know, we are the children of a long lineage of decisions. That means when I think about decision making, genetically, we should all be experts at decision making. If the genetical content is holding true, you know? It is the wonder about what is beyond a moving system. This is one of those, I would say, automata questions. You know, sometimes the only thing you could do at the void is smile. Smile how it's alive now. Smile at how you see the colors of the realm, how you see the designs of the realm, the sounds of the realm. You know, I have had moments where I have hated my existence, subjectively first. And there's been moments where I can tell you I have been super grateful, as if certain prayers I remember making when I was young, that I was happy that they didn't come about, you know. That means there is so many blind spots to the advanced human being that it is the strength of the world that is needed to liberate the individual. One cannot just purely do it alone. Allegiance with nature's mind. That means, think of it this way. Think of it that there are certain people on this planet, back in the day they called it a dream, now they're calling it simulation theory, that they think there's 1/100000th of a chance that we're in a simulation. Let's say we interpret the simulation as alive, and let's say the planet had a mind, and let's say the mind of the planet was like a child, you know, and that the planet was like, no, I want to play, with the souls that have come in my gravitational field, and so imagine we were in a simulation of a planetary mind, you can say poetically, in the personality of the planet. That means imagine that as a filter to every person's view. It is an interesting idea that we only have one lifetime to be like, let's say if the person rationalizes, okay, I got one lifetime to be a selfish human being, one lifetime to go and find whatever kind of cheesecake I want or whatever. you know. So the same way the person can see how their lifetime can be justified. It's like they have one lifetime to be selfish and the humanistic desires overflow. I would say one can also see that they have one lifetime to serve humanity, whatever that means to you. That means humanity should be a word that every person has their own honor of it. That means this is really where empathy comes in, where you see someone who is going through a pattern you have gone through. And people feel their lives are unique. They feel they are, in some sense, special. But I will tell you, there is something in this world that the moment you act superior to nature, it knows. That means imagine you have let's say, for eons, wanted to book an appointment to see an incredible, important CEO, and you get a chance and you're in the office of that CEO, and then that CEO is super busy, and the CEO's like, all right, I got time now, tell me what's up. And you are there, and instead of you talking to that CEO, the person is just quiet, or the person suddenly starts taking candy from the candy jar on the CEO's office, and the CEO's like, what is this guy doing in this world? So that's the thing, that when your life becomes important to you, you're also noticing the flow of the moment. I would tell you that this is where I notice, like, this is where I would say karma is feedback. I'll give you an example. Imagine this was a simulation and you touched something and it glitched. That glitch is like karma. It's like karmic feedback, I would say. So in some sense, I would say before any sort of defeat, there is signs of defeat. Or before any sort of victory, there is signs of victory in the battlefield. It's like nothing is like suddenly you were like, okay, I'm going to open my eyes and it's going to be all good. Usually, when you open our eyes, we see the bad. When we close them, we think we're good, but that's also bad. Really, I would say we should stop thinking that we are good and bad people. We should realize we are just human beings. As simple as that, human beings. A skeleton with flesh around it and skin, and recently in the vast timeline of this universal sector, we have named ourselves. And it's so easy to act like a god in your living room. I am telling you, it is like I have felt like like on Mount Olympus, you know. Sometimes when I've taken a shower. Honestly, gratefulness is like inner realm minimalistic luxury. You know, because I will tell you, I learned this life lesson when, like, since childhood, I was a rock collector. As a kid, you know, I like collecting rocks. And after that, my father gifted these kind of like special. Um, I wouldn't say special, but like these in Eastern culture, like in Iran, there's these Sufi rings. There's these unique. They have a unique ring culture that is not perceived similar as the West, I would say. Just wearing rings and whatever. So a lot of people wear rings, for example. And I would say, so I started having a passion of my father. You know, when I was living in Canada, he would go to Iran when I was a kid, and he would come back and he would bring a ring. You know, so I have this collection of rings and whatnot. But I'll tell you that I, wearing this ring, I remember having a ring, and I was on a train, and I was about to leave the train, and I had such an ego about the ring. Like, it was like, I had the ring on, and I was like, yo, man, this is like, you know, I literally felt like a fantasy character who had found like a magical item. And so, I had this ring, and I'm telling you, the moment I stepped out of this train, the ring fell out of my hand, fell somewhere underneath this weird air conditioning, underneath the seat of the train, and it was unreachable. And it was as if literally something that I had desired to have to be with me, you know, kind of like in that moment, suddenly left. You know, it was literally like the ring abandoned me. Gravity took the ring away from me, you know. And it was that kind of feeling where Khalil Gibran has this thing. Of course, he's saying it about lovers in his poetry, but he's saying it like, you know, if they belong to you, you know, they will come back. If they don't come back, they never belong to you. Some idea like this about lovers and whatnot, you know, in a mystical sense. And so when the ring left, I suddenly had this conclusion, okay, it's like that's it, that was the time, as if objects have a life cycle in your consciousness. You know? And our body as an object has a life cycle in the consciousness of the planet. And I will tell you one thing that every human being I find should do in this life at least once is to go in nature or somewhere in your backyard, look at this world, the whole thing. Just consider the whole planet, you standing on a planet, and put your hand on the grass or on a tree, and just say thank you and breathe. Thank your world. That means it's like human beings must begin. You see, it's like I saw patterns of this in ancient ideas of, you could say it's going back maybe before pantheistic pantheism. Yeah, pantheism. Before nature worship, pretty much. You know, there was a level of relationship with where you can say it wasn't like what some people call the shaman, what some people call the Ayurvedist. You know, these are like, in some sense, characters who were human beings who had a sensitive relationship with the spirit. I could say poetically, with the spirit field of nature. And so what does that mean? That means there needs to be an allegiance. There needs to be, literally, man has to become friends with the planet and then live in or live here. Okay, so guys, my attention has come to the chat section. Welcome, guys. W01 in the chat section says, I enjoy being in your presence, so uniquely familiar. It's a pleasure of feeling like home, sharing the experience in our oneness together, going back before creation, and I know again in the future. First of all, lovely words, but I will tell you, when this world stops looking new to you, that is when you have become all of it. That means we are being the world simultaneously as we are being ourselves. And if the archetype learns to listen, let me tell you why the ego, the idea of the ego fears the true witness, the unknown witness. Because the ego will see it doesn't exist. The idea of self, the subject, will be afraid in the void. You know, that means the objects are like a brave soldier. The body has no choice. It listens to the commands of the mind. But then we go to the subject, the idea of self. And that idea of self, I will tell you, it fears truth. Because truth is not an idea. Do you see? It's an instant forgiveness of any person the person has loved or hated. Through the realization they don't know. Do you know? In the sense that everybody's inner realm is unknown. Everybody is fighting a battle we can't see. That means it's like, you see, imagine a billionaire and he comes on YouTube, smiles and says, I'm happy. You know, I'm powerful and I'm happy. You know? And then people are like, yeah, this guy's powerful and happy. You know, this guy doesn't have problems. Why would he have problems? But then you begin to see whatever you do to the outer realms. It doesn't matter if I open a book, if I close it, the mind remains as the mind until the whole view on the whole system changes. That means true forgiveness means you got to forgive the world that's the self is in first, then to be able to forgive the self. That means, imagine like our species does something incredibly stupid in the future. You know, let's say a nuclear bomb goes off or something. You know, or let's say something weird happens. And if that happens, it becomes instant, where the species are like, okay, fools err once, that's okay. Fools err twice, we have become fools as well. You know, that means in some sense. I don't know, I'm trying to say that this world can move in many ways. We are in it temporarily. Right now, me speaking, I just feel I'm piloting people's attention, you know. And it's really a journey. And you choose how much in this journey you want to participate in, you know. And that's where the free will comes in. That means it's not just, you know, I don't know, sometimes I feel like the person can be waiting for the world, and sometimes I feel the world is waiting for the person. You know, that means even the events of nature, how they take place, you know. When you look at even familiar patterns, you know, there was this view, and this was in a sci-fi context, but I remember there was this game, and in this game, the game was on the way the game designers had designed the game, developed the game, was that you would endlessly restart in the same map, right? And so they had created a dialogue, you know. They had created a dialogue for one of the characters. That means the game would just reset, you know, in the same map, you can say. But the character in the map would say, hey, this seems familiar to me. And it was as if they had attached this looping in time context to the whole narrative. So I could say that this world may feel familiar to you, or in some sense you may feel familiar to the universe. I am saying, when I think about thousands of years in the future, inevitably collective mindhood is going to be engaged. I feel we're going to first reach it digitally, but we can totally also have an evolutionary return to nature whenever we want. There's a Sufi mystic poet named Hafiz. He says, "Your heart and my heart are very, very old friends." As if he's saying, buddy, you think energy has a face? You know, there was this person, I think it was Ibn Sina, I could be wrong. I think it was Ibn Sina. Somebody came up to him and they're like, Ibn Sina, how are you so polite, man? How? Like, how is this possible? You know, how can you be this polite? And how did you do it? How did you learn to be this polite? Ibn Sina turns around, it was easy, man. I learned from the root. You see, everything you see can have a counter. You know, every moment has a counter moment. Think of it as if we have the idea of antimatter, okay? So I want to say the idea of any event has an anti-event. That means, as I'm saying, like, think of it this way: the same moment you are hearing me speak, you know, there could be a realm where I am totally doing the opposite. You know, that means it's as if I am just going around silently, I'm just saying, like, right now I am more focusing on the mind's vocal, a sort of vocal project. But I would tell you, I could see in a parallel universe how I could have never given these talks and just gone out there and done things too. You see, somebody, it was Buddha actually. you know, you know that song, somebody used to know. The Zen master's like, kill the Buddha. You know, guys, in Zen, they have this thing. They say, kill the Buddha. What they mean, of course, it's a Zen saying, by the way. What it means is so many disciples of Zen, you know, novices in Zen have gone and sat down and meditated, and they've suddenly felt their past life they were Buddha, you know. And the Zen master would come with a stick and they like hit the student and be like, no, kill the Buddha. That means let the idea go, because if you don't let go of the enemy you're fighting, you are enslaved to your the enemy. What does that mean? That means if you choose to see an enemy there, you will be defined by it. As Friedrich Nietzsche says, one has to be careful in fighting a monster that one doesn't become a monster in the process. And the saying goes, he who stares into the abyss, the abyss stares back into him. Something like that. So it could be the case that if you have paid attention, here's the thing: if the person feels they can't have enough energy to care for the design of the phenomenology, then emotion can really make decisions quickly. I would say the quicker the decision is, the more emotional it becomes. The more time you have to make a decision, the more levels you see. Think of it as if, like, the moment somebody asks a question from you, it's like a Tetris game, and the Tetris pieces begin falling. So if somebody asked you a question and you took like a minute to answer, imagine how many Tetris pieces would have fallen then. You know, guys, I'll share a story with you. There's the Zen master. And he has a bunch of disciples. Now, one of the disciples starts stealing. And all the disciples are like, yo, this is messed up. What is this? You know? And so they go and say it to the Zen master, and they're like, sir, this guy's stealing. What do we do? And the sage is like, forgive and forget. Don't touch it. Don't touch the moment. Don't continue on. And so they go on, this disciple that's stealing continues, and suddenly the disciple is stealing steals, and I don't know what the guy is doing stealing from monks, like what do monks have that the guy's just stealing. But anyways, like in the Zen story that I read online, I'll tell you this, that the whole point of it was that eventually all the disciples get fed up and they grab the guy and they take it to the disciple, to the Zen master, and they're like, listen, you either kick this guy out or we are all leaving. And there the Zen master looks at all of them, and it's a moment where I could tell you, I can tell you, it's like if it becomes super easy to face the storm, then you really enjoy walking in peace. You know? So what happens is the Zen master says, all of you know the difference between right and wrong. You all can leave. But this poor soul doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. Who will teach him? And the disciples, literally in the Zen story online, they had written what was the term? A torrent of tears, found the eyes of the disciples. That's the thing. We cannot call ourselves advanced if we're exiling and banishing every expected failure, Has order attracted chaos? Or has the moth not realized the flame will burn? You see, nature, it's not born with a mind. It extracts a mind. It picks up the mind. It wields a mind. And I think that's the meaning of life. It's just in the whole Excalibur metaphor. You find that one moment where you find a sword in a stone that only your eyes can see. And when you dare trust the unknown, your intuition, and do not wreak havoc to a system that is so unupdated, that means this world is on this civilization is functioning on a child level. That means like a little kid. We are living in a little kid civilization. Let me tell you, to be cruel to a childish civilization is the ultimate cruelty. I will tell you, and that's when the paladins of karma suddenly, poetically they animate. That means the more chaos there is, the more chaotic activities there are, the more jokers there are in the world, the more Batmans there are. Yo, imagine Batman and Joker, like a yogi, was beside Commissioner Gordon and was like, these two have been reincarnating lifetimes fighting each other. And imagine Alfred, like Batman's butler's beside the yogi, and he's like, what about me? Me too? Have I been like, Batman's butler all these lifetimes, And the yogi's like, probably. Let me tell you, there's something about novelty that it's like the ultimate pillar of civilization. It can't even be touched. It's one of those things where I would say there are certain states of mind that maybe the person, through an unknown intuitive rhythm in the inner realms, may find authorization in that moment to look through. But there's some things that man cannot see with his eyes alone. That means you can't see it unless you are a human form. I would say for me, guys, if I was to truly move in my inner realms, let's say somebody came here and somebody asked, like, okay, Mr. Within, what do you think is going to happen 400 years from now? Let's say somebody asked this question. Okay. The way I would really, if I had a very short time, somebody was like, you have like a minute to answer that, I would close my eyes, immediately activate a geometrical body, and move through all the patterns, literally like it as a geometrical form, fly through landscapes in the inner realms. And then based on how far I see before the timer ends, I accept and I share. Because that is the thing. There is so many paths, but we can only take one. There is so many ways to live, but now is the only moment. I would say there are two important figures that in our modern times that we should acknowledge their story. And I would say it's the story of Christopher Hitchens and the story of Peter Hitchens. And of course, I would say that both are mighty orators and, in my view, advanced communicators. But when I look at life, it is an endless proof that it balances itself out all the time. You know, it is a good question. If we are, like, I've never been asked this from anyone, but I thought if I was asked, like, if I was a viewer of my own channel and I was listening to what I was saying right now, what would I ask? I would say, Mr. Within, if you are saying we are all this non-dual, unknown attribute, this witness of this known objective realm, then what is the point of building an advanced civilization? Who are we building an advanced civilization here for if we are never this? And my answer to that would be, this is why we say art is not dead. This is why joy is necessary for the survival of the ideals of the inner constitution of this I thought we are. You know, it's as if, like, you know, there's certain laws written in the outer realms and there's certain laws accepted in the inner realms. Imagine you were a person who, whenever you wanted something like sugar, let's say you wanted like a cookie, you know, you never could get like a cookie. You know, sugar was something that was like you never wanted, never was allowed, you know. And so you would be a person where, let's say you had tried endless times to get a cookie and your hand was slapped midway in the air, you know, by like a ninja. You know that it's like the whole point of mysticism, guys, is there's more than chaos and order. If you're identifying with one side of the coin, technically your attention. Here's the thing: the bad guy is constantly looking at the good, and the good is constantly looking at the bad. I will tell you, bad people have to know what's good first to deviate from it. Bad people have to be good first to then be able to be bad to it. You know? There needs to be some point of reference. So I would say the whole point is somebody was mentioning the Joker. Joker is a joker. That's the whole point. Life is a joke. So you laugh as it burns, you know. But let me tell you, time is what's burning the world, not the Joker. The Joker is nothing compared to the joke that the Joker time is. I would say time is the ultimate in certain Vedic thought. It's the devourer, the ultimate devourer. That means people didn't fear the jaws of a lion or some wild beast. They feared the jaws of time. You know, the yogis. Bon Arkham in the chat section says humans are too dumb to help each other. You forgot one word, two words. Humans are too dumb to help each other so far. How do you know? How do you know more than this moment? People can't tell the weather tomorrow, you know? You know, a person can give a model on reality. I'm sitting here projecting linguistic models, I would say. You know, sharing, like, you know, designs on notes I've taken from my own enterprise. Guys, you know, there's something that it you can say it differentiates weak character from strong character. Weak character has to bring the world to its down to its own level to feel equal to. Do you know? But I would say strong character is saying, no, 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 no. Everybody go as far as you can. That's it. It's just pretty much we're actors on a cosmic stage. You believe it or not, the the set is not set up by you. It's nature. You know, the only thing we have control is in the lines. The lines, the script. You are the writer. It's like that's the only privilege we have. You can write your own script in this life. You can rewrite your life. So, but You know, guys, there is, after a while, I find there is really nothing one can do with the chaos and order of the realm. You know, archetypes are everywhere. Nature filters into a sort of sieve where our brain is a sieve of sensory reception of the realm through light, sound, and whatnot. And all of these suddenly translate into the story of the character we think we are. And yet we say we have a choice. You know, people, there's $1 billion, what is it, like self-help industry kind of market or something. And I'm asking myself, how are people helping themselves? You know? And so I realize it's because we think we need help. Not that people don't need help. I mean, whenever it's healthy even to ask for help. But I'll tell you, um, when it comes to nature, it's as if it's kind of like somebody imagine like, you know, you only get once to be here. Now, or do you want to play around? Do you want to um, identify with the past? Because I'm telling you, it's as if, here's the thing, if we were truly modern, we can't be defined by the past. And if we are not to be defined by the past, we have to move in a world that has nothing to do with the past. So technically, it's like there's no such thing as past, present, future. There's just moment hopping. Do you know? Okay, guys, I found. I was reading some quotes from the Joker, like from the Joker movie. There's a very interesting quote from the Joker where he says, "They laugh at me because I'm different. I laugh at them because they're all the same." But the retaliation of Joker was to still respond to the same. You see, that means if Joker was truly different than people, he would go living a life that had nothing to do with people. But because it still had to do with people, that means deep down the subconscious was never the Joker. Do you know that means there was a sort of human dimension still in the atmosphere of the psyche, you know? Oh, guys, I see why. The Joker says, there's this quote where he says, "You have nothing, nothing to threaten me with, nothing to do with all your strength." It's power. It's like power, like a toy taken from a child. Now the child wants to take everybody's power. You know, I would say the joke is the Joker was never the Joker. He couldn't be. He was the Joker only in response to society. And so that's the thing. It's theatrical. It's the theatrical expressionism of the nature. You know, guys. First of all, people in the chat section. Um, um, I mean, be polite, guys. Come on, 2020. You know, people's minds deserve better language. And if your mind doesn't, then it's perhaps the whole world needs to know if you're running the chat section. That means chaos will break you. You can go towards chaos. You'll just exit the system very early. That means it's like, what's a simple way to get out of here? Don't care for anything. And what does that mean? That means you get, not that you get out, you destroy. That means it's like you don't realize the value of an opportunity. Life is like a iced cappuccino. If you don't drink it, it melts. Guys, what happens to the Joker without Batman? Let me tell you, he stops existing. Oh man. Guys, tell me something. Bond, this is the last thing I'm gonna say. This idea's gone too far, man. But I'll tell you. Tell me this. Tell me the difference between Joker and a child. Do you see a difference? Tell me the difference you see between Joker and a young child. Name the differences to me. Because I see the Joker like a child. I want it now. I want the result now. So instant response now. Do you know I want change now? So go fight now. I want things now. Do you see? That is destroying the potential of civilization. You know? Can you imagine Batman and Iron Man? Imagine, Batman goes there, and says, "I'm Batman," and suddenly Iron Man comes in the room and says, "I'm Iron Man." Batman's like, "Dude, can't you see I'm here?" Oh my god. Sorry, guys, I'm distracting myself and totally dishonoring this talk. Good thing I'm not a samurai. Okay, to continue. Let me turn the music off. So, let me make this full screen so I don't get distracted by the chat. God damn, it's been for 10 minutes, like, wondering about Batman's kind of karma, you know? Oh, man. Guys, I did not want this episode to become, this, to elevate to this level, but let's see if we could climb back up. So, when your humanity calls to you a strength that cannot be taken, pretty much what can human beings do? Creatures, 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Each creature in front of their eyes experiences, again, I gotta re-emphasize this, experiences an endless outer realm behind their eyes. They experience, in some sense, I would say, a void. For me, the endlessness of the inner realms is the absence of form and movement. That means it's like I'm looking at a tree right now, and that I have a concept for the space between the tree. Space is that concept where it's like what is between the branches is space. And so when I think about my own mind, that means how am I giving a concept to space? How am I even conceptualizing space? And that it just simply seems like you can totally notice the inner realm. So a massive activity needs to occur. where after we consider 8 billion human beings, let's say biologically we managed a way to have 8 billion human beings, we solved the poverty issue, so all human beings on a physical level in regards to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all were all human beings were like, let's say they had everything physically. So then we would say, all right, so after the bodies are in check, like the soldiers are ready, then we wonder about the mind. So we wonder about the activity of 8 billion minds. And if I was to make a list right now of what are things that 8 billion minds can do together, one of it is to actually build something physically. I call this the body of the advanced civilization. For me, I feel the grandchildren of those in construction are serving the body of the advanced civilization. We're serving the physical, serving the body of the advanced civilization. And then the other approach would be, in some sense, so one thing we can, as 8 billion human beings, do is build legitimately an advanced civilization. Then the second thing we can do is to share. So I would say hunting and gathering from our inner realms and sharing it with the digital global tribe, or eventually even on a more real level. You see, it's becoming an interesting time where as cultures and nations have been separate, and now there's globalization occurring. What that means is it's just like a whole new world inside a world is emerging. Now, what else can human beings do? So the check on the list was build the body of the advanced civilization, then build the mind of the advanced civilization, and then I would say abide as the soul of the advanced civilization. That means I wouldn't I would totally be down with a sort of culture, I would say, where people who get old and they've served, imagine a human being from the beginning of their life to the end, they were just serving the advancement of their civilization, and some at the end of it, let's say the advanced civilization had occurred, the person would be honored, you know honored as if they lived as the body of the advanced civilization. Even on a physical level, they served the realm. They served the realm on a mind level. Then the last thing is left is to be it all. It's like that moment where at the end of the performance of eons, the performer bows at the infinite stage. you Excuse me, bows on the infinite stage. And I would say to abide as the soul could also be like, another thing could be, just to add more to the list, would be to play. We can play. That's one thing 8 billion beings can do on a rock. And one thing they can do, which it wouldn't be part of this list because I'm looking at efficient activity. I wanted to say 8 billion beings can destroy themselves too. Like, that's an option. We can remain animals, or we can try to at least take responsibility for galactic sector. You know, that means people are just thinking about saving the planet. It's like you should be thinking about like the solar system. Even beyond that. And really, what it is you only get one life to see how advanced you could have been. That is simply it. That means even if you had no reason to care for an advancement, you only get one life to see how it's going to be. Let's say another thing 8 billion beings can do. So some people are serving the body of the civilization, its infrastructure, even architects would be considered in that. The mind of civilization, let us say all the whole scholarly academic intentions of the realm. And that would be the great thing, where all universities change their name to universal libraries. Something like that. Where it's like I see knowledge as something that it's like instantly equip. The newest knowledge must instantly be equipped to some degree to the future generations be given to them. Imagine there was a course in school, like let's say there was a class where in this class the class was called desire training, and the parents of the students were like, what is this class, even though all the parents had come to watch and they were watching the first tryout of this desire training class. And let's say they had found some peaceful method to just teach kids that if they could do this, let's say they would say like they're gonna put like okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say desire training class would be it would be a room filled like with I don't know let's give a food example. Let's say different kinds of candy or something, right? And the teacher would say something like, tell the students it's based on if you want take the candy that's better. Do you know you get paid less? Let's say there was a monetary exchange or something. Do you know? That means if the student ate the pastry that was like more better than all the other pastries, the student would get less from another dimension. You know, kind of trying to tell the person that if the moment you perceive yourself multidimensionally, the desires are in different dimensions. That means the person can say they have a desire to desire. You know, where is the second desire that technically renders another dimension? Guys, I want to share something that I haven't shared in a while, and it's a chapter from this science fiction novel I wrote, called Messenger of Giants. And it's a chapter where there's a very epic chapter before this, but I'll say this chapter. It's What's happening is that there's a main character named Rousseau. The year is 5025. Human beings have gone through certain enlightened collective revolutions. Robots are living like human beings, and human beings are living on a much more superior desire level. That means human beings have become like angels to robots. Robots can't see human beings, only certain rich robots and certain enlightened robots can see the human beings. So what happens is Rasul is this main character. He's human, right? But the whole point of Rasul and this sci-fi novel, guys, it's where I've kind of let myself have as much freedom as Carl Jung had in the Red Book, in writing the Red Book. And what that means is it's like everything is off limits. This is for the future. And so what happens with this in this chapter? Okay, so Rasul has a friend named Justicar Nova. Justicar Nova is a robot who is like a shaman. He's like a shaman, like a tribal shaman, but he's a robot. That means he's a robot with a personality that of some of the of a very deep connection with nature. Now, what happens is, and this robot and what do you call it, Rousseau, they were classmates, believe it or not. And I know this may sound silly, but the other chapters, if you read them, they'll do justice to how the ideas come across. Now, so what happens? Justicar Nova, and Rousseau. Suddenly, Justicar Nova is a robot, and there's something called the robotic realms, and there's something called the Sky City Council. And so Justicar Nova turns to Rasul as they're climbing down the, what was it called? The Ocean on the Mountain Peak chapter. Excuse me. So what happens then? Um, Justicar Nova Justicar Nova says the Sky City Council wants to see us, and they will be here. He says something like this. And you see these two robots, kind of imagine like Halo-looking suits, but completely black, or like Iron Man kind of suit, completely like black with these white laser kind of angelic-like wings. And these suits open up, and Rasul and Justicar Nova kind of get into these suits. And when they get into these suits, the suits close and they instantly like fly into the air. And the next thing, Rasul gets a vision. I can't remember, but I remember writing it. Rasul gets a vision. Rasul gets a vision here, some specific vision, and then suddenly opens his eyes, and the suit has opened, and he's above clouds. Literally, if it was a movie, it would be such an epic scene where it's as if Rasul and Justicar Nova, the Iron Man suits, kind of open up. They step out, and they step onto the clouds. They can walk on them, and the two Iron Man suits with the kind of angelic laser beam wings, they suddenly go back into they just like as if like they just go down underneath the clouds. And so Rasul and Justicar Nova are walking on clouds, and as they're walking, the moment they reach a point, they take a step, and suddenly this whole invisible structure appears. And so it's like this door, this kind of only door in the clouds, imagine. And they open it, and they go inside, and this is the chapter of the Sky City Council, which is remarkable. Rasul and Justicar Nova go in, and what happens is that they see a dolphin. They see a dolphin in a robotic suit with like hands and legs through the robotic suit, but it's a dolphin in a pod. And this dolphin, later on, they realize his name is Captain Fino. And so he's this dolphin that's giving his speech in the Sky City Council, a representative of all the animal realms, the inferior animal realms. Excuse me. Now, Captain Fino is saying something. Rasul and Justicar Nova go in. Captain Fino notices them and immediately responds. In the story, it's kind of strange. The way I've written it, everybody pretty much knows who Rasul is. And so what happens is there's a man sitting on a throne made of pure light. Literally just pure white light. There is no attributes, no face, sitting on a throne. And he is the member of the Enlightened Society, which is the political system of the story, of the sci-fi story. And so what happens is in this, there's this whole thing where the Sky City Council, Captain Fino, I don't remember what Captain Fino says some things, and then and then the whole point is there's some other character they're named. There's other characters there, but one specific character is Lord Karta, and Lord Karta is a representative of the Central Sun Legion. So in this sci-fi novel, all the suns in all solar systems belong to this galactic kind of universal policing agency. You know, they call themselves the Central Sun Legion, and their view is that the center of the universe is a sun, and everybody in the galaxy acknowledges the Central Sun Legion being, in some sense, the mightiest kind of jurisdiction. One of the mightiest, you know. There is in the story also super souls and whatnot, beings that are collective. Their jurisdiction surpasses individual beings. And so Lord Karta, and how does he look like? You could imagine somebody like with a gladiator kind of helmet and armor, but he has 4 hands and his whole body is like fire. It's like golden. You know, this sort of golden. The whole point is he's made like in the reflection of the sun. You know, so his weapons are like light beams and light spears. And in one chapter, it's like a giant lion that roars light and like. So what happens is the member of the the leader of the Sky City Council, the guy sitting on the throne that's just made of pure light. You know, he says to Rasul that something's happened, and by the way, there's 9 parallel dimensions of Earth in this story. That means the enlightened society is the first government that is, in some sense, is controlling, in some sense, 9 parallel dimensions of Earth. And the whole point of the enlightened society is that it happened when the first artist became a politician. And when this artist became a politician, this artist just made one nation, it suddenly made itself so much more beautiful than all the other nations. And all the other nations that were spending all their budgets on warfare or whatever, they suddenly are like, yo, what's going on there? You know, and they suddenly see that it becomes an artistic competition where nations are competing to see which nation is more incredible, is more beautiful, you know. And so it was one of those things. I remember I wrote like this whole paragraph where from the enlightened society they say like all ideology is artwork and should be treated like artwork, that one day will become like culture and heritage, you know. So anyways, the light guy from the enlightened society in the Sky City Council, he tells what happens? He tells Rasul that 9 giant beings, giant kind of, you can say, even close to like, I don't know how big I described it, but 9 giant beings in space are flying towards Earth, you know? And Rasul suddenly gets a vision, and in that moment he tells them, I know what I need to do. I need a crew, and I need to instantly go into our atmosphere. And the sky people in the Sky City Council is seeing this, and Lord Carter comes up. You know, he's from the Central Sun Legion. He's like, I don't have time for this. And it's in that moment where Rasul sits down, raises his right hand, his palm is open. He suddenly turns his palm into a fist, and in that moment there's a wave, and every person in there suddenly gets an image in their inner realms, and they suddenly see this vision that they've seen of there's a hit. Okay, I don't want to. Okay, maybe I can give it away. In one dimension of Earth, there was a 10th parallel dimension, and that was infiltrated. There is some intense vision. Rasul goes outside with a plane. What do you call it? Space shuttle. Some shuttle. Sorry guys, I don't have this in front of me. I can't read it, but I just image based on God. So pretty much what happens is Rasul gets in with the crew and he goes into outer space, and people in the Sky City Council are watching this, and Rasul is going purely on this intuitive instinct or something. And so what happens is that Rasul goes there, and suddenly something shocking happens where Rasul's in the ship, and the person who's flying the ship, the pilot, looks at Rasul and he says, "Sir, there's something outside." And they see one of the 9 giants has instantly appeared in front of Earth. And everybody's watching, like, what? Like these 9 giants that were flying towards Earth from, like, this point in space, one of them suddenly appeared. And one of them appears, and what does he do? With his hand, it's like a giant, right? With its hand comes, imagine, so like Rasul is in a ship, this ship is in space beyond the orbit, this giant hand comes and grabs, literally goes through the ship, and everybody is in the ship except Rasul, and takes Rasul, and Rasul is in an orb, and the chapter is written, Rasul is out of his body. He's just watching the whole thing, Rasul, as consciousness, as just pure attention. The hand of the giant takes the Rasul and throws him like a baseball at this planet. And this was where the exact imagery, the reason I wanted to share the sci-fi. This is where Rasul is thrown, and it's as if he suddenly realizes it's a test. This is where the giant is testing Rasul. And he throws him, and what happens is Rasul is thrown into the Earth in the middle of a battlefield, and there's everybody in the battlefield is looking in some sense intensely, and there's these 2 orbs, one blue, one yellow, running towards Rasul from the middle of the battlefield where all these soldiers are fighting, and they both come over Rasul and they just stay there. And what Rasul experiences in his consciousness is that these 2 orbs were endlessly destroying. One of them was endlessly destroying every atom, every particle of Rasul's existence. The other was keeping it alive. So Rasul was between 2 orbs, endlessly experiencing his existence and non-existence. Do you know? And he's just watching it. And the whole point is Rasul, this is his first lifetime as a human being. You realize that throughout the story, he's like a galaxy whisperer. That means he's been a galaxy, and he's pretty much if you would say from an angle of in his past life, he was a galaxy. And something happens, guys. I don't remember exactly. I would say in this life, there's many ways we can move. And we're oscillating between the fullness and emptiness of the realm. And free will is our ability to move the Rubik's Cube, the mystic's Rubik's Cube. That means it's like we have one life to live. Now, if we live for ourselves, it's as if we have lived for something that inevitably was never here. If we live for the world, then we're living for everything that can inevitably still be here. We just need 8 billion advanced communicators. Because it's behavioral, right? That means we could say, like literally the infrastructure is missing. Like imagine right now 8 billion people were teleported into the future. Like imagine like the biggest teleportation event took place where I don't know, the leader of all nations were like yes, and every person alive on this planet in 2000, let's say 40, let's say in 2040 had an ability to have a species time travel. And time travel and teleportation, I mean, technically, we have to master teleportation before we can apply it to time. But imagine 8 billion people traveled into a future advanced civilization and we're there, and we'll be like, okay, so we wanted an advanced civilization, we got one. Now we still have to learn how to behave in it. We have to, I would say, build our lives again, you know. That's pretty much why I think we wake up. You know, it's like the person is super grateful. You know, the person's like, wow, I get to live as a creature rather than non-existence, just being, you know, rather than not being here, I am here. I am now among, you know, walking alongside the great spirits of nature. Anyways, guys, I don't know how that chapter ends, but Rasul ends up going back. Justic Nova goes back to the robotic realms. Captain Phenom goes to the animal realms, and pretty much they have to make the 9 parallel dimensions get ready for a massive invasion. You know, and of course, this is part of the science fiction, of course. Romy has this quote. He says, You know, in one talk, guys, I began by saying everybody is reacting to emptiness. And I would say this is what sets the mystics apart. Guys, I actually need a quick intermission. I'll be back. Okay. Really, guys, I mean, everybody has freedom to look at this world in any way. It's just that, I mean, if you want to break something that took a while to build, it probably means you're unconscious of its value. That means I don't know how a mindset of destroying things can create something better. How can a destructive attitude, a destructive cause, have a constructive effect? That means you can try to erase a sentence or you can write a new sentence. And writing a new sentence is much quicker than wanting to erase the past to bring some sort of self-claimed justice. Really, there's nature is just here as an opportunity. That means when I wake up, there's again this whole mentality of serving the mind of the civilization, serving the body of the civilization, and inevitably realizing if we create a win-win scenario, imagine we had built an advanced civilization that nobody could make mistakes. That means you could make mistakes and learn from it, but that means it's like even if you made a mistake, the civilization was so advanced it would rebuild itself. You know. A strength that cannot be taken is an unconditional contentment with the instantaneity of attention. That's it. That's the big truth. That whatever you do, you're still being. Just like this iced cappuccino, I gotta fulfill its purpose. Can you imagine the person wanted to, the person was about to drink an iced cappuccino and somebody ran. It's like, hey man, don't. And you're like, why? He's like, that iced cappuccino is sentient. And you're like, how? He's like, it's in a pantheistic view, everything can have a mind. And I'll be like, buddy, then technically our mind has found a reason to no longer be a mind. There has to be a sort of balance, yin-yangness to the inner realms and the outer realms, regardless of the philosophy. You can't be too unknown, because then there's no point. And you can't know too much, because then what's the point? After you know everything, that you can't do anything. And you can say man is the only animal out of all the animals in nature that can notice in his environment and respond to something. So that means all human beings are technically geniuses when you compare on an animal level. If we treat ourselves like an animal, we're like aliens. If we were to think we're animals only. But if we were to treat the realm as just minds, I will tell you, eternity is in no rush. That means non-dual perception has nothing to do here, literally. That means when you go to the edge of the unknown, you care for knowledge. When you go to the edge of the known, guys, I'm just looking at two squirrels literally like running up and down this tree. And That's it. Nature is just journey, and it can choose to play along or it can choose to break, Constant states of stillness, movement, stillness, movement, stillness, movement, stillness, movement, stillness, movement. Sound, silence, sound, silence, sound, silence. And then man is left in the middle of this being like, oh my god, all of this world for me to have belief systems extracted out of? Oh, thank you, universe. You know? You've set up an endless language trap. But what can I say, guys? We are energy talking to one another. Who knew? Who knew the energy that we are introduced to through the scientific lens? An energy that cannot be created or destroyed, but transforms from one form to another. That means the viewer, the unknown viewer, is the source of energy. So the more we learn to live as minds here, the more we will become masters of the elemental and energetic realms. I will tell you, to find mastery of the energetic realms is not just an old person doing Tai Chi in the park. It is in some sense finding a moment in this life where you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm being an elemental being right now. What does that mean? And then you see the laws, and that's when it becomes, the medical sciences become incredibly interesting for you to look at biology. I'm telling you, if scientists just use examples of the human body, they will science will grow incredibly. There was a sage named Ramdas. He said, nature is a manifestation of God. I find that to be where God is a manifestation of nature, yet an inseparability. That means, how can we have an idea of the macro without the micro? That means all of knowledge is just stretched out. That means it's pretty much, I'll tell you, anything you evoke and access, so any situation you're in, you wonder how simple it is, how complex, that's one axis. Then you wonder about how known it is, how unknown it is, that's another axis, you know? Then you wonder about how efficient it is, inefficient, that's another axis being evoked in the moment. For me, my outer realms, I'm honestly at this point living very simply, minimalistic life. But in the inner realms, I live like Tony Stark. What I, what I mean is, like, how Tony Stark in like the Iron Man, there was a scene where he could move with his hands holograms, holograms of light and image. I can just sit anywhere and immediately evoke geometrical shapes in the inner realms that roam, that have a life of their own. What does that mean? That means anything I see in the outer realms, like a photo, like Photoshop in the inner realms, I can change. A lot of things that you see in nature have nothing to do with intelligence. I would say people have no choice but to be possessed by the intelligence of their world, you know? And so, what does that mean? That means we have to, believe it or not, free ourselves from the idea we have on what the world is when the world is changing. This is why they say yesterday's enemy is tomorrow's friend. It's like one of those like ancient sayings. Another one was this was from Sogyal Rinpoche. He's like, unless you conquer your anger, your enemies will be inexhaustible. That means if you're just a person who is, your inner realms are like uncomfortable, that resonates, that echoes. I personally have been like in, I don't know, certain social contexts. For me, it becomes the inner realms have to be like I detach from my body. So in that way, the inner realms can't be expressed in the outer realms. Sometimes, if language is an illusion, all it takes is to close your mouth. I'm telling you guys, I'm definitely sure there's so many people listening to this, feeling like Mr.Within. Are you explaining the silence again? And I'll tell you, really, it's not that I'm explaining the silence, is that all our explanations are in the silence. So technically, everything we explain, there is this, like, just like how there's matter and there's space, there is language and its absence, right? So that's the linguistic simulation. So it could be that if you're in a group of people, let's say you're in a gathering and people are like, yeah, let's all order pizza. That's the linguistic simulation of the moment. That's the story being simulated in the moment by sound. And when it comes to psychology, for example, there's frameworks. Now, I don't encourage this to be linear. I say that if you're wise in this planet, you'll pilot playfully. If you've understood language, your resolution towards it won't be supreme love or supreme hate. You suddenly realize, like, just imagine all the times in your life you have played something, Like, was there a reason? No, it was like a balance of like wonder, emotion, whatever. You just went with the moment. Sometimes it's okay for the moment to be unknown. And I don't know, guys. It's I'm not, even though I've been I poetically speak. It is also a bit scary. Like, like, yeah, that. But the thing is, the fear is not reason based, because where there is no body, there is no reason. So technically, we cannot reason a response to our own absence as phenomena. Because if we were to, technically reason wouldn't be reason. Somebody said, was there a reason for reason? And the person was like, I don't know, man. Can you imagine in like the walls of the greatest university, it's written the words of like this famous philosopher, and what was his famous words? I don't know, bro. Can you imagine like thousands of years from now, it's like, oh my God, it's like people are quoting how we're talking now. It's like our ancestors spoke in through this ancient language, and we were like, oh. Everything is just generated energy. Really, I have learned a lot about the mind, but I would say the unknown is just, it's not even a teacher anymore. The person's like, let's say in dialogue with like that inner voice, and the person's like, yo, inner voice, are you the logos? The inner voice is like, no. The guy's like, what? And the person's like, oh, yo, inner voice, are you my spirit guide? And the inner voice is like, no, I'm not. And the guy's like, are you God? And the inner voice is like, no, man, I'm not God. And the person's like, are you some dark minion or something? And the person's like, no, I'm not. The inner voice is just like, no. Everything you say, are you this, are you that? Are you an extraterrestrial? No, 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 no. And you're like, what is this what's the point of having access to this inner voice that just says no, you know? And eventually the person's like, okay, they're trying, and suddenly the person thinks of an answer, and he's like, are you the world? And the person says, is quiet. And then the person asks, are you the self? Are you me? And the inner voice says yes. And that's when I would say you have completed your intuitive training with the logos. Then you abide. That's the next phase, you know. There's no time for glorification of the inefficient human being. It's like, for whom? Pretty much, it's just like we're 8 billion human beings, or 8 billion artists. Now, these artists are coloring their own faces, but once they realize the world is waiting, that means we should stop coloring. Imagine there comes this global thing where all artists who were drawing on paper were like, we will no longer draw on paper, we will draw on the houses and homes, and the world will become our canvas, not just this piece of paper that's like ruining, you know, disturbing nature, whatever. So do you see, can you imagine suddenly the art begins integrating with the cultural dimensions? That would mean endless artists are working with endless architects. Do you know? The wallpaper of all homes suddenly becomes, for example, I mean, that could be a bit too far, but like something. I'm just saying the world deserves to be showered with novelty. It deserves to be blessed with new horizons. And at the end of it, it could be meaningless. But if it's meaningless, like, then it's perfect permission to be free. That means somebody's like, yo, there's no point to this life. It's total justification to be chaotic. Well, you're like, okay, you could take the same argument and say there's no point to life. Total justification to be ordered. You see, at the end of the living moment, you're left with your attention, your presence. And there is a sincere resonance, I call it. A state where you are not resisting your world and the world is not resisting you. That means your inner realms no longer are fighting your outer realms. You can walk through any moment and anything can happen, and you're watching it first. Then, if required, the moment can animate as the witness. That means moments where I move as the witness, there is no fear, there is no thought. It's as if nature is like it's as if attention is on a roller coaster ride of nature. I'm telling you, the inner realms are like endlessly training to become a world. You know, that means the body, you got to go to the gym to train it. But when it comes to the mind, you got to endlessly journey as attributeless attention through new world, new world, new world. And what is the point of that? The point of that novelty means you suddenly reach a point where you realize the point of it is not to attach to belief system. It's to bring the new, quickly find the new. To every person, no longer trying to imagine like children, no longer idolizing massive, like, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, everything has its view, but I'm just saying I could totally see that every person needs to learn to honor the person in the mirror. When that happens, the ultimate relaxation arises. That means, imagine there was a law. Imagine there was a law passed, and this was called the law of forgiveness. And people were like, what? A law? And it was like a legitimate law and policy. And people were like, what does this mean? That means by law, you have to forgive a person. You know? That means if somebody does something, you have to forgive. Do you know? At the same time, there's countermeasures to the reverse imbalance. But I'm saying, like, can you imagine? So imagine, because it was law that we had to forgive, everybody was just forgiving. That means it was as if it was law. We had no choice. Whatever happened, we had to forgive. Do you know? Then it would be to a point where forgiveness would become so second nature, where the person would no longer think about competing. Not competing, but what's the word I'm looking for? You stop fighting in wars that never existed, and you learn to walk with the world you're in once. Really. And guys, this talk has gone for 2 hours 30 minutes. I don't know. To me, it feels like 2 minutes 30 seconds. All right, I'll open it up to Q&A, guys. I've said a lot. One last thing: when your humanity calls to you, respond to it, whatever it is. When you see human nature's efficiency, you gotta care for that. If you don't care for that, then it's like, it's like, what's the point of blind goodness? It's like, would you rather be good and blind, or bad with clarity? And imagine you were bad and you had clarity, but then you suddenly realized, you could be good and have clarity. That it doesn't matter what jacket you wear, and it doesn't matter what the weather is, and it doesn't matter what your eyes have dared to move towards. All that is required is just to realize that the piloting attention can be simple. Master your simplicity, and your mind will be at your service. Find ultimate contentment. That means go literally train, like how Shaolin monks would go in the forest and train. Go and train, noticing that ideology cannot touch you. That means even emotions can arise, and yet emotions cannot touch the you. That's the cool thing. A subject has no identity. A subject has no physical, visible content, doesn't have a body. Do you know? It has design, it has form, but it doesn't have embodiment. And honestly, like, our minds are definitely some sort of higher dimension than our body. I mean, come on. Like, I'm actually going to read something before I. Guys, I wanted to say something a bit silly, but imagine like a person comes out of those doors. This is like a picture of a street in Japan. Imagine a person comes out of those doors and it's like, "Hey, are you is this being live streamed in a dimension beyond this inanimateness of this picture?" That means, when a character in a story gets angry at the fourth wall, that is next level mysticism. There we go. Excuse me. Honestly, guys, I'll make this announcement at the end of these talks, but pretty much I'm kind of forcing myself to take a hiatus from these talks. Um, but anyways, I'll read this thing. let's declare this. I think it's about time I return to the void, return to the silence. This chapter is called A Destination of Destiny, and it's from the poetry, not poetry, this book I wrote in 2000, starting 15 to 17, called The Source of Language. And again, guys, excuse the show noises. People who help are held by many. How far can the cosmos stretch your eyes and in your eyes? The wonder of consciousness is an indivisible unitary moment. How far can the moment go when it's always here? Trajectories of a new kind must be found. The creator within and the creation without are the same. When all meaningful categories of ideology are found to be simultaneously void within the moment. Not that there's any pride involved in this, but I have witnessed countless times people and human beings on this planet that say sentences like, I hope I go to heaven. I hope I don't go to hell. What these sentences suggest is that the general excuse me. I'll read that again, guys. What these sentences suggest is that the general outrage on heaven or hell is on the focus that it is somewhere to go to, a destination of destiny. So in my personal experience at a young age, I wondered about and realized that if heaven and hell were destinations, if I don't move right now and be still, where would I be to go? I noticed that when your mind is quiet and desireless, eternity becomes your companion and your guidance. If your mind is not quiet and turbulent, extinction becomes your guide and companion. That means the concern that means the concern for extinction lights up the flame of greater duty of humanity in the inspiration of the present moment. Is enlightenment the greatest joke ever? Because there was no joke. Is enlightenment the greatest joke ever because there was no joke? Are we all entering the gods of our own minds within the indivisible unitary existence? We're not here to be a beautiful, revealing. We're not here to be crushed by the feet of giants and our most unknown questions. Rather, we are all here to invent the next great inspiration of the whole cosmos. You are a cosmic being, and you don't need to act like one, for you're already being one. The oneness of consciousness in such a... Oh my god. Sorry guys, these sentences are small. And, oh my god, I changed the size, I've told you. Okay, there we go. The oneness of consciousness in such a beautiful, revealing way is unquestionable. The true, in quotation, spiritual seeker requires to abide by the guidance of their own heart and trust how their intelligence is a natural development that does not need to be controlled by the identity of your physical manifestation and reception. What if chaos and order were twins? Every moment is a divine, beautiful cosmic playfulness. Mr.Within has said and shall say it again, that the wisest in this world are the most playful. Playfulness is a divine allowance, and all children know this before the ego change them in a space-bound and time-bound reference point? What if your intelligence is beyond categorization and ideology? How would the excuse me how would the lotus open next? So what if your intelligence is beyond categorization or ideology? How would the lotus open next? Beyond the colors of your world, there is one light that holds it all. Some men before they sleep become the wakefulness of the sky. When you see life in quotations as it is, the omniscience of being shall not be denied to you. Because we can tell stories, we are not characters in a story, for the capacity of the storyteller suggests that even electricity can be comprehended beyond voltage. The symbology of your own mind recalibrates to where your attention steps to and steps in next. Is love the ultimate guardian of the galaxy? When mankind is peaceful, even aliens shall meditate on top of their spaceships within the acknowledgement of the intelligent, all-pervading empty space, behind the back of the mind of existence. We are all lovers of the cosmos. Do not deny yourself the joy of ultimate union. Your mind is a moment of existence, and existence is one happening that can never be separate. How hilarious that when I was young and I looked in the mirror, I thought that when I saw my body and face, I saw myself, but I realized that the rest of existence was in the mirror too, and I had forgotten to acknowledge the universal self. Is bliss a wise sage? I once saw a white dove fly in the sky, but I forgot to mention I was the sky. The destination of destiny is the present moment. It has always been. Be the joy that you are. I would say three words that will become the guardian of the future species, I would say, are just rise, mankind, rise. Thank you for listening.